Hello everybody, welcome to this week's live chat. We're going to be talking about quilting with pointy rulers. I'll be answering your questions, got a lot of stuff to cover today, but first, thanks for joining me. It's crazy to think that we're already 5 weeks into this challenge. That's been 5 tutorials, now 5 live chats, and I love seeing everybody's comments that they're getting more comfortable with quilting with rulers. Even if you don't think it's perfect, I'm sure it looks great, and it just takes practice, I promise. So in this week's live chat, I'm going to go over the challenge. I have a little video to show you that I put together. I'm going to answer your questions. I'm going to tell you about Build a Quilt, my block of the month program that I have that's starting up, and I'm also going to announce the winner of this week's giveaway and the new giveaway for next week. So a lot of content to go over. Plus, I've been chatting with everybody before I went live and got some good questions that I'll address as well. So hopefully you can stick around because we've got a lot of information. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to share a little video that I put together. I don't know why, I just have so much content, I can't hardly fit it all in the tutorial. And so I took some content that I had to cut out and I put together a quick little video, and I posted it on the Facebook group, the Free Motion Challenge Facebook group, so some of you may have already seen that. If you're not a member of the Facebook group, there's a link to it in the description box, so you can definitely check it out. It's a fun group, people share pictures, ask questions, it's a lot of fun. And so that's where I put that quick little video. I didn't have time to do the whole intro and everything. But anyway, the one thing I want to show you is when we're going around those points, even if it's a right angle or more of a curved, we're going to do everything the same way. So here I was showing how to use Chevy to go around that point. Because even if I went all the way around it without repositioning, I would get a curve. Well, it's going to be the same thing, right? I'm still going up to that point until I feel like I'm going to go over it, and then I'm going to reposition the ruler. So I'm going to slide it over and continue right down. So it doesn't matter the point, you're still going to address it the same way. Go right up to it, reposition to the other side of your foot, and come back down. And here we'll see it one more time. What's nice about the Chevy ruler is you don't have to flip the whole ruler around, so it makes it a little bit easier. Now, I also have a quick little thing I'll show you here in a second where I'm using an arc ruler. So if you have a bigger arc ruler from earlier in the challenge, or maybe you have Archie, you can definitely still create that. Now, if you notice, it's a little blurry, but that arc has a point, but still we know if I go all the way around it, it's going to be more curved. So I'm still going to stop, reposition to the other side, and come down. Now, this ruler is fairly big, but I'm only using the very tippy top of it. And I think that's what's amazing about rulers. You can definitely use all the different sizes or kind of use it to fill in the space that you have. And so if nothing else, just remember that. You can use the rulers you have for a bunch of different areas. Okay, one thing I want to point out though is if you look at this border that I'm working in, if we imagine that the red is the block and the teal is the border, I'm working from the other side. And it was kind of fun. I saw somebody commented on that in the live chat. If I'm going to turn the corner, it really depends which side of the border I'm quilting on. And honestly, I didn't even think about that when I was doing the tutorial until after I had this content here. So I'm still going to work around. The difference is when I go to turn the corner, I'm not looking for the inner corner. I'm looking for the point directly across from it. So basically, I'm imagining that that point directly across from the inner corner is where I want it to line up. Sometimes when you're looking at your borders, if it seems overwhelming, try to think of it as a rectangle or a strip. That corner is a different shape, right? And we'll learn how to deal with that. But if I can think of it as a rectangle and I want to get to that particular point. And so here I'm just kind of showing where it is and then getting to that. Then, once you get to that point, then you can do whatever you want in that corner. And here I'm just doing a simple little kind of curved line. In the tutorial, we saw how to use a motif in that area, or you can put a completely different design there as well. It doesn't have to be the same shape. You can put some swirls or whatever design. Now here we can see I've finished that section. I'm on the outer corner. If I want to do the same thing, I'm going to go to the other side. So I'm going to travel over there and quilt them. In this particular example though, I flipped it around, so I'm still quilting those arcs, they're just flipped in the opposite direction. Now when we saw the Taj design, I kept them all going the same direction. So you can definitely have fun and go with all those different directions with this. So I hope that kind of helps clarify some things. I know it can be a little crazy thinking about it sometimes, but as long as you kind of have an idea of where you want to turn that corner, usually that will help you do it. So sometimes I feel like when I give suggestions, I make it more confusing. Hopefully that helped demystify it just a bit. Remember, you don't have to do something special in that corner. You can do something completely different. So always like to remind you of that. All right, so now let's look at some pictures. Okay, so speaking of border corners, this is the sample that I had in the video, and I used the Taj ruler to create those lines, overlap them. But remember, when I want to turn the corner, I was aiming for that inner corner and then rotating around it. If I wanted to, I could have, again, done something different. I could have added a different shape or more lines. I think in the sample that I quilted during the challenge, I only did one main loop, but you can really have a good time with that. This particular example though, I was quilting all those Taj lines on the same side. So I was working from the same side, and that's why I didn't have to worry about turning the corner on the other side. But I want to show you, if you look in the blue border that's just below it, that navy blue, I have some arcs there. And so this is what we're going to see next week, because we're going to work with clamshell rulers. But it just goes to show you that you don't have to put anything too freely in the corner. Just turn the corner and move on. So try not to worry too much about it. I know it's easy for me to say because I'm on the other side, but you can definitely create some cool motif or effects. Okay, so let's talk about, oh wow, that kind of glitched up, sorry. Speaking of motifs, I hope you're not tired of them. This was the third week in a row that we've seen them. If you're tired of them, don't worry, this is the last week. But we were using Taj, that wider ruler, to create that narrow motif just by repositioning it. And if nothing else, hopefully that will give you the idea that, you know, I can use these shapes in a lot of different ways. So if you have a ruler that doesn't quite fit, doesn't quite work, you can reposition, you can kind of make those customizations. Now in the tutorial, I used the arc ruler to make that space a little smaller and easier to manage. Next week, we're going to see a little bit more about combining rulers. When you have a bunch of rulers, you probably just want to play with all of them, right? So definitely kind of have fun with that. Now, when it comes to motifs though, since this is the last time we're going to see it in the challenge, I think anyway, I don't plan on bringing it out, you can do a lot of different motif designs. So if you remember, we're just taking that shape and rotating it around a fixed point. That's it. Whether that point is the middle of the block or a corner, it doesn't really matter which one. But there's some different ways you can go about it. So here I have the same Taj ruler, except I'm creating this kind of motif, and I left the ruler in the picture so you can see it. I'm rotating it around that fixed point, but the lines aren't going back into the center. So it's creating more of a, I don't know, florally kind of effect. So repositioning it was easy. I just kind of used that middle reference line to that dot to kind of align up on the corners. But another reason that I included this picture is if you look at the corners, you notice how the top left one is a little more rounded. That's the effect you get if you go all the way around. If you want the sharp point upper right, you can see repositioning it will give you that slightly different look. Now, somebody mentioned in the chat that it makes it narrower, and it does. You're adjusting it, it's going to make it at least a 1/4 inch smaller because there's a 1/4 inch in between your needle and the edge of your foot. So it will shrink it a little bit, but I'm getting that nice sharp point, and ultimately that's what I'm wanting. All right, when it comes to using our motifs, using our rulers for motifs, sorry, I love the chat. Somebody said, how many rulers do I own? A lot, a lot. I love them. Anyway, when I worked with Taj on the motif, you noticed I had the wider side at the bottom and the pointier at the top. Well, here I'm just flipping it around. Doing the same thing though, right? I'm using the wider point towards the outside. It's gonna give me more of a flower look, less of a pointy kind of leafy motif. So you can flip your rulers around and try working from, you know, other sides than what's normal. In fact, this is where these fun little, I don't know, variations can come out. And if you try it and you don't like it, then you just don't do it again, right? Sometimes knowing what you don't like is just as important as knowing what you do like. So try flipping it around, try, you know, not going all the way to the point, give you a different effect. Also, let's see, Chevy. So did not know, but somebody asked, can you show me other things you can do with Chevy? And I had already had this one in here. But basically I'm rotating that shape around that middle point. So really kind of use your imagination with your rulers. You can come up with some really neat effects. And all I did here is I created my first motif, and then I started again, offset, and did it again. And I could keep going and make a really cool effect, but I kind of decided to stop there. I know I've said this before in several live chats, but it's so important. When you're practicing, I think it's great to load a piece of fabric or make a big quilt sandwich and try a bunch of different things. Challenge yourself. See, oh, how many different ways can I use this ruler? It's really going to kind of help exercise the different directions, the different effects. And then when you're done, cut out the pieces you like, throw away the rest, and then you have some examples to go back to. And ultimately, that's what happened with these. You can tell they're all on that same tealy kind of fabric. That's because I was just playing around, and then I'm only showing the pictures of the stuff that I like. Okay, so another question. So the question did come up, what can you do with Chevy? So I threw a couple pictures in here real quick. This is stair-stepped lines with Chevy. This was actually in the wavy ruler handouts. It's in one of the handouts that we saw. I think it's wavy ruler. Anyway, you can go back to that challenge and find the handouts, and it will have that, how to do it. But really cool kind of stair-stepped effect. And this is the same thing, just shifted. So when we did rulers, remember we talked about rippling them or moving the ruler over. This is what I'm doing here, just moving it over quite a bit to create that different effect. And I really liked this one because it kind of creates these pods that you could fill in with other designs, and I'm just quilting along and changing the orientation. So when you're working with your rulers, it's all about changing the orientation, the direction, the spacing. We've talked about that with the wavy rulers, but it's true with everything. When you change up those little things, that's when you come up with the variations. And I would much rather learn 5 different ways to quilt one design than learn 5 completely different designs. So be sure to play with those variations. It'll just give you more bang for your ruler quilting buck. Okay, so now I want to tell you a little bit about Build-A-Quilt. So Build-A-Quilt, and there were some questions on the chat too, but Build-A-Quilt is my block of the month. It's a program that we started 4 years ago. It runs once a year, and it's a way to customize your quilt. So I like to say it's like a block of the month, but better, because you get to choose your colorways. So we have 3 different color options, and then we have 3 different optional finishing kits that you can purchase, so a lot of variation. And up to this point, all the blocks and patterns have been designed by me, but now for the first time, I'm designing the fabric collections as well. So when I was preparing the challenge, I was also designing 3 different fabric collections for Build-A-Quilt, and I'm excited to show it. So signing up for Build-A-Quilt, you get the pattern and fabric for 10 blocks. It's one-time fee. Depending on if you're international or US, the price is different. US is $69. So $69, you get one of these mailed to you every month for 10 months, and it makes those 10 cute blocks. So this is the inked colorway. I'll show you more about the fabric here in a second. One other color option is the Flag Day. It's more patriotic. It just shows you the same blocks in the different colors. And then Stay Wild. So this is a different, the 3 different colorways. So it's amazing how just the different fabric placement creates such a different effect. But I gotta tell you, I'm super excited about the fabric. So if you don't like these fabrics, don't tell me, because I designed them. But the first one is Flag Day. This is a patriotic theme fabric. I feel like, you know, right now, maybe a little patriotic unity would be nice. And we're actually teaming up with Quilts of Valor and donating a portion of the proceeds to them. So if you are a part of Quilts of Valor or you wanna get involved with that, there will be finishing kits that are applicable for what they need, and they're also supplying labels for the donations. So really excited about that. Stay Wild is the other colorway. So this is very floral inspired, very nature. This is a little tricky for me because I'm not a huge flower fabric lover, but I really had fun kind of thinking about this soft, nature-inspired collection that still is wild. So we're talking sage greens, some warm taupes, some different floral prints and textures with a little pop of like a dusty blue. So very, very fun. And then there's inked. So this is actually my favorite. During the pandemic, or during the shutdown, pandemic is still going on. During the shutdown, I took up calligraphy, which is so weird that I would take that up, but I loved it. And so that inspired this collection. In fact, if you see that on the left, there's little phrases written. I actually wrote those with my calligraphy pen. So very scripty, teal and gray, my favorite colors, thinking ink splots and stuff like that. So really kind of fun. And if you're interested in signing up, you can do that. There's a link in the description box below. One of the questions came out was, when will registration close? Registration will be open through the end of November, so you can definitely sign up anytime before then. The great news is, since I'm designing the pattern and handling the production of that, we're not going to run out of fabric. Last year was really rough for Build a Quilt because we had a hard time getting a lot of our fabric orders in. And so this brings me to this week's giveaway. Whenever we do Build a Quilt, we have an optional oops kit that lets you have a little bit of each fabric in case you make a cutting mistake. Not that I think people will, but you know. Or if you want to make a fabric substitution. This time, since the designs are all mine, I was able to design a panel that has a strip of all the fabrics, so they're all on one piece. Makes a quick little baby quilt or fun practice for quilting, and one lucky winner is going to win a oops kit or the fabric panel in the colorway of their choice. So you'll have the hard part of choosing, but you'll win the oops kit or the fabric panel. So to do that, there's a link in the description box. You can click on that and we'll get that out. Also, Alicia won last week's giveaway, the thread kit, and I've already emailed her and let her know it's coming, so congratulations, Alicia. And good luck this week to whoever, to all of you, and one lucky winner is going to get that. So let me real quick get back to where I'm at. There we go. It's fun trying to coordinate all that stuff. So now, that's a little bit about Build a Quilt, a little bit about the last challenge. Let's answer some of the questions that came through, and then I'll peek on over to the chat and see if there's any questions there. So, question about the low shank rulers. So the 3 low shank rulers that were my new 3 low shank rulers from previous rulers, those will be coming to us on Monday. So there was a delay in production, what are you going to do? But as soon as they come in, we've got everything ready to ship those out. So if you've ordered them from us, they will be coming soon. If you've ordered them from somewhere else, they'll probably be coming soon too. They are shipping from Creative Grids and probably have already shipped. We should be getting them on Monday. So if you are waiting, we'll get that going. All right, another question was more of a comment. It was like, when you're trying to turn the corner with your Taj ruler, when you go adjust the ruler or you get that point, you're actually making your shape a little narrower. And so that can be hard to guesstimate where that corner is going to be. So, and the person had commented, it was just really hard to hit that corner. Okay, perfect example of having best laid plans, right? Having it all figured out and then realizing like, oh, I still have to kind of fudge it a little bit or be creative with the placement. So being comfortable with that will make it easy even if you plan on marking out. Another thing I'd say is if you measure not the ruler, but the transition points, that will show you how far you're going to go. So if you're like, okay, I'm this far, let me guesstimate it. There's a reason I wait until I'm almost to the corner. If I try to figure that out really early on in the border, there's going to be adjustments, or it's not going to be perfect, right? Because, I'm free motion quilting. There's no such thing as perfection in free motion quilting. So if I get, about a third of the way there or kind of close, then I can kind of plot out the next couple steps. But knowing that when I'm faced with the option of either having 2, like a big one and a really skinny one, or 2 that are both a little smaller, I'd rather spread out that through several of the shapes. It just makes it less noticeable. So yes, repositioning the ruler will make the ruler more narrow, but I promise it's not, you can still figure out the spacing. I hope it made sense in the tutorial, the 2 different ways that I use Taj, whether I was using just the very top or I'm using the bottom, just to create different effects. Ultimately, just remember when you're going through your border and you need to reposition, just make the reposition line the same on your ruler. As long as it's consistent wherever it is, it's going to be fine. So hopefully that helps. I will say turning corners it just takes a little practice, right? And it's one more thing you have to think about. You're already thinking about holding the ruler and keeping it close, and now we have to think about where we end up. But that's why this video is week 5 and not week 1, right? We're kind of building off of it. So try not to get too hard on yourself with that. Okay, another question that came up, and I thought this was great, was talking about transitioning with wavy rulers. So if you've already done the wavy ruler challenge, or if you quilted with wavy rulers, as you quilt from needle stop to needle stop and reposition, sometimes that transition is a little jagged, right? That transition looks a little off. Well, it's going to really, I mean, it can't be perfect, but here's a couple things to think about. If you're getting like a jagged stitch, and this happens to me sometimes, look at the position of your quilt. Sometimes what happens is when I stop, the quilt maybe sags a little bit, I reposition the ruler. Well, right now, the quilt is being held up by the needle, right? It's maybe pulling a little bit. When that needle comes up, and before it goes down, that quilt's gonna shift a little bit, and then you have that jagged point. And that happened to me a couple times while filming. On a long arm, that's not the case, but on a sewing machine, definitely. So when you go to reposition, just take a second, make sure the quilt hasn't shifted or isn't pulling on the needle, and that will help you avoid that little jagged stitch. Or just do it a couple times and make it a unique feature of the quilting design. If you're more worried about the stitch length, right? So maybe as you slow down, the stitches get small, and as you take off, they're small and they get bigger. If you don't like that change in stitch length, which, I think it just adds a little bit of texture to it. If your sewing machine has the function like where it kind of revs up, I mean, think about like driving a car. You get to a stop sign, you stop, and then you go. You're kind of shifting momentum, so getting comfortable with easing in and out will really help. The HQ Stitch 710, which is what I use, when I push on the gas, it ramps up to the speed I have it set. So it's kind of like goes, with my hands a little bit. So if you have the option, try that. If you don't worry about it. The more you practice, the more you kind of get used to speeding up and slowing down into those stops. I don't know if this analogy will help, but if you've ever been in a car with a new driver and they get to the stop sign, they wait till they get there and they slam on the brakes and then they take off, that's the same kind of thing as kind of easing into the stopping point and then easing back out. And we can all pretty much do that. It just takes a little practice. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit. On the long arm, I'll say that the transition is the stitch length, and keeping it even is the trickier part. So stitch regulator will help that. And then using the reference lines to make sure that stays straight. But ultimately, just practice. It was funny because, sorry, I don't remember her name now. The gal that asked the question said, is it normal to have the jagged lines? I said, yeah, it's normal, but not unavoidable. So if you have it, you're completely normal. You're just getting used to transitioning in and out of the different ones. So hopefully that helps. There were a couple questions about moving the large quilt. That's definitely the big thing, right? And I've talked about it a couple times. Well, now we're getting on the quilt where we're kind of working on the diagonal and not necessarily on the edge. So hopefully just taking your time, making sure all the quilt is up. You don't want any of that, gravity pulling on it, and just kind of focusing on the area that you have to work with, right? This area right here is what I have, and that's how I'm going to work. Now, I will say when I'm given the choice, and I know I've said this in a couple videos, I love to work vertically. Right? I like to work vertically because I can use my arms to push and pull, and I have my whole arm length. But on a sewing machine, if it comes over here, I can't go too far, right, until I run into it. And so getting that momentum and trying to use it to help continue on really helps. If you're quilting a large quilt on a sewing machine, I would also say posture. No, I've said this before, being taller than your quilt a little bit so you can push down, using gravity on your side, and then just, try not to tense up too much. I know that's our normal tendency to kind of do this, but that's really going to end up not feeling very good. So definitely have some good posture to help. And just know that it's only the hardest in the center. And that's why I like to start in the center of the quilt, because it's never going to be harder than it is right there. I know when I'm starting a new project, I'm usually really excited about it, and so I'm all gung-ho. So I like to tackle the hardest part first. If I wait till I'm almost done with the quilt, by that time I'm so over it. I'm like, oh, I just want this quilt to be done. So I like to do the hardest part first. So those are the questions that just came up. I'm going to flip on over to the chat. K-Blade, I don't know if I'm saying your name right, but what would be the best way to add extra lines on the ruler itself? I don't have any here to show you, but it's called glow line tape. It's amazing. It's like washi tape, but it's thin. And it's highlighter color, so it's like red and yellow and green, or pink, hot pink, yellow and green, and you can just cut off a little piece and put it right where you want that line to be. It's not transparent, but it's opaque a little bit, so you can still see a little under it. And like, I love washi tape, but it's pretty thick. I mean, even a 1/2 inch is pretty thick, so you can definitely do that. Or using painter tape, anything that isn't going to leave a residue that you can quickly and easily see. Wouldn't matter. I've actually used a Sharpie before like a little line on there, and then just rubbed it off later. So whatever works, you can do that. Good question about getting into the middle of SID. So that was a good question. So I didn't show that on the long arm. I'm always kind of conflicted, like what to show where. So SID's cut out doesn't have a channel into it, and that's because when stitching on the ditch, I don't want you to fall out of the ruler anywhere. On the long arms, most have the ability to raise up the foot. You have to kind of manually grab that foot and pull it up and then slide it in. Once it's in, I just leave it in until I'm done with it, right? It just stays right there. So hopefully that helps. Another question that came up on the Facebook group that I didn't get a chance to address was, how do you tie off with SID in there? Like if you're on a long arm, how do you grab the thread? And this probably won't make sense. I'll have to do a little video for it, but I just leave the ruler in place and I move the quilt and the ruler over, grab that thread, and then come back. So I'm not digging in to SID to try to grab that thread. I'm just moving the machine over and grabbing it and coming back. I'm sure that makes no sense. So I'll make a little video that shows you guys how to do that. It's actually pretty fun. So let's see. Oh, Karen said, love the idea of the ruler storage in a notebook, priceless. Right? That wasn't my idea. One of my students in one of my classes told me that. I thought, genius. And in fact, in the second season of the Midnight Quilter, you might see a project that is like a DIY kind of ruler case notebook thing. So kind of excited to share that. Oh, Newland says, I was also asking about SID on a sit-down long arm. Same thing, just going to raise up the foot and slide it into there. Hopefully your machine has that raise up foot. Chris, thanks for the calligraphy compliment. Love it. I don't know, it's just something about those weird hobbies that we pick up when we're in lockdown and having something quiet and slow. And it's so funny because my husband Jeremy kept saying, they make pens that always have ink in them. You don't have to keep dipping it in the ink bottle. But then I started collecting all the different kinds of inks, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really fun. So, just a creative outlet. I think it's great to have a lot of creative ideas. So, all right, just gonna see. Oh, Kelly, this is such a good question. So I'll end on this one. How do you get patterns for the previous Midnight Quilt show? The links go to Craftsy, but the patterns are gone. Sad, isn't it? They go nowhere. The patterns were all owned by Craftsy and then Blueprint. I don't know where they're at now. Unfortunately, I don't know. They're not my patterns. Most of them were other designers, and so I don't know. You can contact the new Craftsy and ask them if they're still offering them, but I'm guessing maybe the pattern designers had an agreement with the old Craftsy. I don't know. I'm sorry. I wish I could be more helpful. But the good news is, once we get into the new Midnight Quilter, we'll have some new patterns and hopefully just erase those. So sorry about that, Kelly. I wish I could be more helpful. That's the downside of when you don't own your own content, which is why now I do my own challenges and videos and stuff. Anyway, I digress. All right, next week's challenge is going to be the last official video of the challenge, but we'll still have a bonus for the borders, and it's going to be clamshells, and these are going to be fun. We're going to talk about creating different effects. We're going to talk about combining rulers, and then we'll be back for the live chat next Thursday. So I hope that whether you're caught up on the challenge or you haven't even started, it doesn't matter. I just hope that you're enjoying learning more and getting more confident with it. And if you've liked this live chat or you like any of the previous videos, if you'll give it a thumbs up or leave a comment on YouTube, that really helps me out as well. Well, I hope you all have a safe weekend, and I'll be back on Monday with that next tutorial. Until then, happy quilting.